If you want to support our podcast financially, please visit patreon.com/IIMBSB. Also, email us with questions or ideas at ifimaypodcast@gmail.com.
In this episode, we each share a few recent wins.
And then we jump into the Jonah Hill, Sarah Brady controversy, and we do a little role play of what kind of interaction the two of them could have had.
Welcome to If I May Be So Bold,
a podcast about relationships. I'm Dan Epstein, recording artist, Enneagram 4 at ADHDJ.
I'm Justin Waring Crane, model, actress, singer, dancer, mathematician. I know what you're thinking.
Ah! What am I thinking?
She's wearing lipstick. I'm wearing lipstick today because my lips are so chapped. And then because of that, there's like scabbed. And so I'm like, I covered it up. I tried to cover it up with lipstick to like hide the scabs. I don't think it's working. But second thing.
Okay.
You know how I have this persona that I like to pretend to myself, which is that I'm a mathematician.
Yes.
Okay. Because famously, I'm like pretty bad at math. And I think that maybe used to bother me. And like, I really struggled with math in school.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was so dreaded. Like,
yeah.
I math would make me cry.
Well, I know how you sometimes get flooded if you feel like something, you're not going to understand something. And I see the way you can kind of like have like basically a panic reaction.
Yeah.
So I'm imagining that.
Yeah. And math just felt so like inaccessible to me.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe part of my healing as an adult has taken this form of where I like pretend that I'm a mathematician. And I kind of just like
that's how you understand the world.
I like close my eyes and I'm like, like twitching and I'm like, oh, yeah, like doing an equation, like
chuckling to yourself about like something
like,
that just like
I finally figured it out. Yeah. Like that's what, and those movies are like, like representations in film or TV where it's like the huge chalkboard. It's covered.
Mm-hmm.
It's covered in equations.
Sure.
And like Good Will Hunting, obviously it was like, just like
everyone's
thrilling.
like gathered around watching somebody go like in their flow state.
Or like
the whiteboard.
His fantasy in Rushmore,
Yeah, it's so good.
Is huge. And like Hidden Figures. We could go on. But so my latest dream, as I should come up with a name for myself, my mathematician self. But my latest dream is to create a new number. Yeah. I have a few other things, but I want to hear from you. What do you want to share?
I think my meds are working.
That's great, Daniel.
It's interesting. I'm pretty sensitive to substances and pills, and I've never really had the experience of like, well, that's not true. I did for a while. This one migraine medication was like changed my life, but it's not really so good anymore. But I've never really had the experience of being like, oh, my physiology is very well suited to this medication. And I feel that so far with my new ADHD/depression med called Strattera.
Hell yeah.
Also, as an Enneagram 4, I'm like, this medication only works for like, not that many people.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm part of, I'm one of the chosen people. What else do I want to share? I've had, I cried a lot in therapy yesterday. in a way that I've never really done. Like I've cried in therapy and I've cried somewhat hard in therapy, but this was like this was an example where she like had me go with this feeling, this like internalized belief, like really intrusive thought that I sometimes have about my life. And she had me just like go all the way into that belief and that feeling and like feel it as much as I could and stay with it for like probably 10 minutes.
It's a long time.
And eventually my body got exhausted from feeling that because it was so intense. And I started to feel like the muscles of that feeling or emotion like fatiguing. And then she was like, I'm having the instinct to come give you a hug and I just started crying so much. And she like came and sat next to me and put her hand on me, on my back and my shoulder. And I like, God, when I'm in therapy, I'm like, it's uncomfortable always for me. I'm like talking through these things. I'm like kind of on one hand, like sick of saying the same things, talking through things that I've been struggling with for so long. And I feel it's like hard to be observed doing that. And part of me is like imagining other people in therapy, like being really like uninhibited and like dynamic and like charismatic or something.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, this is the version is for me. And I'm like accepting that, but I'm also like, not very fun.
No, it's not.
Yeah. And I don't know. I felt like I like loosened the grip a bit of my like control mechanism in that session. And it felt encouraging, I guess.
That feels good, right? Feels freeing. I was crying in group therapy.
Oh, you were?
Last night. Yeah. It was like, I don't like to cry in therapy. Even just like individual therapy. I still don't like to.
Why don't you?
Because I feel just like ugly.
Yeah. I was saying to her, I was like, I mean, it's interesting you have that. And I think probably so many people do have that. But I'm kind of like, my experience of it when it's happening is I'm like, nobody wants to watch a man like bawl his eyes out. You know, it's like that is so deep in me of like, nobody wants to see this from me. You know, it's going to make them uncomfortable. It might make them like judge me. It's going to like, even if it's like kind of, you know, this isn't good that it's this way, like it's going to like trigger their own aversion to emotion or something. So in a way, I guess it's like a people pleasing instinct. Sorry to cut you off.
Did you cut me off?
Well, you were saying you were crying in therapy and you didn't really get to anything.
Yeah, but I actually like every time I do let myself cry and share something that I'm struggling with, it's like every single time I feel better. But the resistance is still there every single time. So I was actually talking about our fight. It wasn't even really a fight, but the time in Santa Cruz Island.
On our camping trip.
Yeah, maybe we'll share that in a future episode.
Great.
Yeah. The other note I had was Sondheim. Not that good.
Yeah. You hate Sondheim. You really hate Sondheim.
Yeah.
Is there a comp for something else you hate? Is in a similar way to you hating Sondheim?
Is there something else I hate
is there
similarly?
something like that's in a similar basket for you?
Good question. Not that I can think of right now. But
how does it feel to be recording the podcast again for you? And like putting them out?
Actually feels kind of good. Like it feels better than it ever has. Maybe one, because I'm feeling pretty good in my life this year. And my mental health has been strong overall.
I would say the other thing that is very much on my mind is this is not the first time I've thought of this or felt this or even probably expressed it on some level here, is just the notion that getting into a quote unquote healthy relationship is going to make your life easy and like your journey like kind of devoid of storms is wrong.
Yeah. Some things do get easier and other things get harder. And it's all like super worthwhile if you're doing it in a way that feels like true and you have somebody who's like with you there. Right?
Yeah. And I'm experiencing that on a different level than I ever have, where there's things that I have come to understand for a long time that are like my traumas, my demons, my areas of woundedness, I will say, from childhood, that I've known about them and understood them for quite some time. And like being in relationship and having to be observed and received regularly living with you, it's like the feeling of no escape is way more intense in terms of no escape without facing these things.
Yeah, no escape from yourself. Yes. No escape from like being witnessed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm pissed about it sometimes.
Yeah, same.
I'm like,
you don't have to be witnessed all the time though, Like,
yeah, but like there's moments where I just feel this like aversion to you that it's so painful and I feel this shame reaction.
That's so normal.
Yeah.
And like I feel it too, it's just like that happens when you don't have enough space and don't have enough like tension, it's like there's nothing to run toward because it's like you're so just already like on top of each other.
Yeah. But I think for me, it's also the other realization I had this week, and then we can move on, is that my relationship to like making music or like whatever creative pursuits I've undergone in my adult life, and also in like sex and relationships, I feel how those things have existed in my mind as a possibility for escape from myself, where it's like, if I get into a relationship with someone I'm like so into, or if I get like so good at acting or singing or making music, the different things I've done, and I get recognition for it, then I will escape this lonely feeling that I feel like I'm often trying to avoid. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And that feels important because I've been trying to figure out what's motivating me in my creative life. And I think sensing that maybe what's motivating me isn't working, isn't a good, healthy place of motivation.
Yeah.
And I think that might be it. That might be it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that like my perception is if part of you, when you and I started dating, was like, yay, like this is like a way I can like escape myself, which for me too, it was. It's a rude awakening to be like, oh, actually this person is like bringing me closer to myself. Yeah. In a way that I didn't really want. Yeah. But I absolutely ultimately do want, but it's not, feels bad sometimes, to be like, oh, I actually can't escape myself.
Yeah. And ultimately, hopefully some kind of relief can come from that, because maybe you will stop draining energy from your life in that false pursuit, that false refuge. And I think that's a pretty good transition into Jonah Hill, who I suspect might be trying to escape himself too. we want to talk about Jonah Hill. And, you know, we're coming into this at a point when much has been made of it, much has been said, but just very briefly to kind of orient us all. Jonah Hill's ex, Sarah Brady, who's a professional surfer, leaked or posted screenshots of some texts that her and Jonah had when they were together in 2021, I believe. And the texts were, people were very divided, but there was a large sentiment that was looking at what he was saying, which what he was saying was basically, here are my conditions for if you want to continue being in a relationship with me. And he was wanting her to not post pictures of her in bathing suits or like basically like sexy photos. She wears a bathing suit for her job. And not wanting her to spend time with friends of hers that he deemed to be, and we're going to probably read some of the specifics, deemed to be like wild and unstable. He just basically, it was all things that from an outside perspective seem like he's policing her behavior, but using therapy terms like boundaries, like saying this in the under the high, like under the terms of these are my boundaries. And so therefore it's like, in order, if you care about this relationship, you'll respect my boundaries is kind of embedded within that, in my opinion. And so there's been a lot of damning of him as like, oh, okay, so you're using therapy terms to be abusive, emotionally abusive and controlling. And also, I think a bit of like, oh, you're a phony because you've presented yourself to the world as someone who's undergone all this therapy. You made a documentary about your therapist and your work with him. And it's all kind of like a big farce. And then there's been people criticizing Sarah for sharing screenshots, because it is rare that with celebrities that we get like the unadulterated screenshot of like what actually happened. It hasn't been like curated or managed for the public to receive it. So I guess my question to you is, we have a relationship podcast. We're interested in this type of thing and how relationships can take different dysfunctional forms. How do you enter into this? Like, what's your first thing that what are you compelled? What's compelling to you about this?
I think one of the biggest things is that, like, if you have wounds, right, anything can be sort of converted into hurting people, like including something like therapy terms, right, or therapy itself. And they mentioned on the Ringer Dish podcast episode where they talked about this, that therapy kind of almost has like no accountability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except what you bring to your therapist.
Sure.
So like people like, you know, present themselves a certain way to their therapists, and people lie in therapy. And so I guess it just for me highlights like, you know, when people say like, oh, like that person should go to therapy, it's like that person is in therapy and they're like still really fucking toxic. And like, and maybe even more so because they now have like all this language to back up what they're doing, even if what they're doing is like really harmful. And, you know, it makes me think about this guy that I dated for 6 months that was like that love bomb situation. I would even call it a situationship in some ways, because I thought it was so much more serious than he did, even though he presented as if he also thought it was serious. But yeah, he had a lot of therapy language. He had therapy like under his belt.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah. And so to me, it just felt like, you know, I was attracted to that because it was sort of then a way that he used to like package himself.
And it's reassuring.
It's so reassuring
for people to be like, oh, this person's working on themselves.
Yeah. So I guess what I want to talk about today around this is a couple things. One, how the conversation, or it wasn't even a conversation, and I know that this is like such a small window into the situation, and we don't even have like actual confirmation that it was in fact Jonah Hill, but that's sort of like,
Yeah.
people are sort of understanding that it is, and I don't think he's come out with anything like
Yeah, he
denying
hasn't
it,
denied it. Yeah.
So, what comes across, what's I want to highlight is how this was seems like such a missed opportunity for intimacy and a chance to like start a conversation, but the way that he presents these conditions, we'll call them requests, or demands. The way he presents them is sort of like, take it or leave it. This is what it is.
Right.
And it's sort of like a closed door.
Right.
And so we can talk about how that was a missed opportunity. And another thing I want to talk about is just some of the words that he uses in these conditions. Like, he says that he doesn't want her to like interact with friends from her like quote wild recent past, right? Beyond like coffee or lunch or something respectful, quote unquote. And he says, you shouldn't post like sexual photos, right? Quote unquote. Friends who are unstable, quote unquote. So I want to talk about that piece of it.
Okay.
So those are the main things.
Let's talk about,
and also the misuse of the word boundaries, right? Which I think some people have highlighted online. It's like, he's saying these are my boundaries, but what he's describing are not actually boundaries.
Yeah, let's talk about the language.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So do you think we need to read the actual?
Well, you just did kind of.
Okay. Yeah, I have some of it committed to memory, but okay. What stands out to me when he tells Sarah that he doesn't want her getting together with friends from her wild recent past beyond something respectful, right? It's like, that's very vague. And it's like something respectful as defined by me. Right. So,
and it's kind of like, you should know what that means.
Right. You should know what that means. And it's also giving him all the power, almost positioning him as like this dictator, right? It's like, I get to dictate what a respectful get together is with these people that I really actually don't approve of, right?
Right.
There was also that part of it where, this is from the Cut article. So, an article from the Cut shared a screenshot from Brady's stories where she wrote that Hill asked her not to spend time with, quote, any friend of mine that he hadn't personally approved of, right? So, I think that's what stands out to me is like, it's like, it's just that he gets to define what respectful is. He gets to define what sexual photos are. So in the sexual photos piece, it made me think of this internship that I had back in my master's degree program, where I was interning at this inpatient psychiatric hospital. And I was like in a group with, some of the residents of the program, and we were going around like sharing different interests as like one of the exercises. And I shared that I like to go to like different hot springs, right? And then like one of the residents was like, get naked or something like that, right? And then I was pulled aside by a supervisor that was like, we have to be really mindful of what we say because of how like it can be interpreted, right? And so to me, it's like when I see that text from Jonah saying like sexual photos, it's like, okay, so if there's a photo basically that you don't like of this of your girlfriend, and you think somebody could like interpret it sexually, like that's on her. And it's like, that's puts all the responsibility on her to like do what? I don't know. Like it's just like it's all like so like boring to me at this point. I can barely articulate it. Like just sort of the kind of like she shouldn't have been wearing that is basically where we end up.
Right. Well, there's a lot to be inferred from the way he's saying what he's saying to her. And what it makes me think of is he's saying he has boundaries. And basically what he's saying is this shit is all really triggering to me. It like completely just, it instills fear and chaos for me.
Yeah.
And therefore you like obeying this equals you showing you care about me in the relationship.
One of the biggest things for me with this is if people kind of know, they maybe know what their trauma is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like step one, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But it's great if people know that they have certain traumas or certain like adaptations, right? You could say trust issues. Obviously, I prefer to say trust adaptations. So whatever that is, like whether they were abandoned or like hurt by their parents or whatever, that's good if you know about that. But then that can become like, instead of like a starting point for some people, I feel like they use that as like the ending point. It's like, well, this is what happened to me. So therefore, like you have to, I'm basically setting up what the rules are for interaction with me. And then I don't really have to address this stuff because
I already told you.
This is what it is. I have this trauma and like you have to kind of get like shape up or ship out, basically.
Totally.
I think some people will like play the game with them and be like, okay, well, if that's kind of like the price of entry, like I'll do it.
Yeah. Right. And like, and I'm imagining that like when these types of things first came up early on in a relationship, maybe they were presented more mildly or like, or maybe she was agreeing to a certain kind of like power dynamic before she was like clear on kind of what it actually was potentially. I don't know. I was talking to a friend about this and he was saying that it reminded him of, because I agree with you, it does feel like he's using these conditions as a way to shut down deeper conversation and inquiry as to like what's really going on for him internally and for them as a couple. It's like, okay, all you have to do is this and then we'll be okay.
Right. Like
end of story.
And yeah, like you made this point yesterday. You were saying that Jonah Hill doesn't come off as a person genuinely in dialogue with his own stuff.
In this
screenshot. And that everything is sort of externalized and then like turned into her problem.
Yeah. It's her problem. Yeah. It's not an issue for him to work on.
Right.
And it just seems like it is a control tactic in many ways. One being, I want to keep the emphasis on your behavior and your like shortcomings. That just feels like what this is.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's
very like externalizing.
It's a power move.
Yeah. Right. And like, as we know, or as we all should know, boundaries are never an attempt to control the other person. And if we want to talk about this now, boundaries are not about what the other person is going to do or telling the other person what to do, right? So just to give an example, if I say to you, Dan, like, please walk home with me.
For example.
This has never happened before. We'll talk about this in a future episode. That's a request, right? Me telling Dan, walk home with me. That's a request. If I were to say, my boundary is that you walk home with me, not really a boundary, right? So for Jonah Hill to be like, my boundary is that you don't post sexual photos, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, but like, yeah. But I see like how he got there. And I don't think he was even necessarily like willfully or like knowingly misusing that term. So benefit of the doubt there. Obviously, still don't think it's okay. But And then a boundary would be like, if you don't walk home with me, like I'm going to need to like take some time to like think about like this relationship, or like maybe a better example would be like if I ask you like, please don't talk to me like that, right? That's a request. If I say I don't stay in conversations with people who talk to me like that, that's a boundary, right? Because it's telling you what I'm going to do, what I'm okay with and what I'm not okay with, and how what my behavior is going to be.
But isn't he saying my behavior is going to be, I'm going to break up with you?
Well, yeah, but then he's saying these are my boundaries for what you are going to be expected to do. Right? Yeah, he's like saying a boundary like I'm not able to be in relationships with people who do these things. So it's like part of it is a boundary, right? But this other part is
in
not.
Practice, what boundaries accomplish it's not meant to police someone's behavior.
Correct. And it's some people might put a boundary out there or put a request out there hoping that the other person is going to get with the program or change their behavior, and then the other person doesn't. But it's like, you have to honor your boundary like either way.
Right.
And sometimes people do like make adjustments and changes for you, but that's not the reason that we do it, right?
Yeah. The reason you would do it would be to like honor your own needs.
Yeah.
In this case, it seems pretty clear that like what he needs is to investigate why this is so disruptive to him. This thing that is somebody else's life. It's not his life. It's like doesn't really directly come into his life. It's just her as an individual spending time with friends, posting pictures, promoting her stuff, whatever. Like the fact that bothers him so much is very much his work.
Right.
And he is not, well, maybe we'll do a little role play to do that. But you have something? I mean,
benefit of the doubt, like maybe, like his therapist seemed pretty with it from that documentary. Like, I'm imagining they do examine why these things are so triggering for him. And so, that's pure speculation. So I just want to say, like, maybe he was looking into these things, but I wish that framing was there of like, this is something that, this is how it is for me right now. And these are the ways that I'm actively trying to work on it. Rather than being like, yeah, this is how it is. It just felt like very like a slammed door. Like, this is how it is. And like, you need to do things differently in order to accommodate me.
Yeah. And it's like, these things trigger me a lot. So to show that you love me, you need to do these things on my terms, when we all know that won't heal whatever wounded place in him is getting activated. That's only he can do.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The thing that
But it does happen in relationship. I don't want to make the mistake of saying like he has to figure this out on his own. Like, obviously healing happens like in a relational way.
Yeah. And there's a world in which they had this thing and it was, pointed out to him that this was problematic, and it was an opportunity for him to look at that. But that I don't think happened because they broke up. But what has come to mind for me, in seeing this is I've been a little bit like, oh yeah, like in this moment in time, like straight men being like, I go to therapy and therefore you should think such and such about what type of person I am. And I was kind of like, I definitely have done that of like presenting myself a certain way. Like you can probably speak to what we talked about on our first date, like was a lot of like that kind of thing. And I'm sure I was trying to present myself as like, well, I've like investigated a lot about myself.
I've done a lot of work.
And it is true. It's like therapy, it's you and your therapist. It can look a lot of different ways, and it is really on you to bring to the table and engage with your own stuff. And how I feel is like I've spent a lot of time in therapy just trying to understand why I feel the way I feel, but that I'm learning more and more that does not equal doing the work to heal those things. Just because you understand them doesn't mean you've healed them.
Yes, correct. Should we do a little role play?
Yeah. So I'm going to try. Do you want to be Jonah or Sarah?
I guess I'll be Jonah.
Okay.
I'm going to be like, I'm like working on my acting.
So we're gonna pretend to be them in this exact scenario as we, with limited information, understand. But like the situation as we understand is Jonah has, been getting dysregulated by certain things like Sarah posting pictures and spending time with certain friends from her past who they've, I don't know, been a little wild in the past together, whatever that means. And Jonah is trying to come to Sarah to express what he's been going through and like find a place of agreement and a way forward through this. Yeah?
Yeah. Okay. Way to set the scene. Okay.
They're walking down the beach.
Oh, okay. Hey, so I have been noticing some stuff coming up for me internally.
Mm-hmm.
And I really kind of need you to throw me a lifeline because I'm feeling really insecure in our connection. I don't really know where I stand. I've been feeling really down on myself. I am insecure about my body, not feeling very comfortable with myself, not really liking what I see when I look in the mirror. And I look at you and you're so gorgeous and everyone knows it and people see it and you get a lot of attention and praise for it. And I just start to feel like so insecure. Like, what are you doing with a guy like me? Don't look at me like that. That's what I imagine is going on underneath if he was being honest with himself.
Okay.
I feel like you're laughing at me.
No, I like what you did. It's very from your point of view.
Yeah.
Which naturally.
That's the only POV that I have.
All right, can I go now? Can I be Jonah?
You're going to be Jonah?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, go be Jonah.
Well, unless you really want to.
No, we don't. I think it's really, we don't have to go back and forth. Fuck you.
Wait, why?
I think you're laughing at me.
I really like. That was really funny.
It was funny? What was funny about it?
Because just the thing of your being like, yeah, she's better than him.
No, I don't think that. So what I'm interpreting is his insecurity.
Sure.
That he's believing that she's better than him. Or else why would he have to take her down a notch?
That's natural. If someone's trying to control them, then like insecurity is obviously a part of it. All right, my turn?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is really hard for me to talk about, but I'm just noticing that when I look on Instagram and I see photos of you, like of your body, and I see all these people liking it and commenting, I'm getting really stressed out. I'm noticing I'm having this like dysregulation and fear and panic, and it makes me feel this sense of chaos, that all these people are looking at you from all over the world like this. And it makes me feel really unsafe in my own body. And I'm just, I don't know what's going on. I'm like feeling really paranoid about like who you're spending time with. And I know this is my shit coming up. Like this is like, I'm going to a wounded place. And I know it's not your problem and it's not your responsibility to fix this for me. But I guess I'm looking for like some comfort and some reassurance from you. Like, if maybe we could just kind of, if you could just like hear this and know that like I'm working on this, but this is a reality for me, that like I see this stuff happening and I don't feel in my right mind, and it makes me want to like run
Yeah.
because I'm not comfortable feeling unsafe in the relationship, and I want to heal it, but it's a lot for me to heal, and it's going to take time, and it's, you know, it might affect some of our relationship and ability to connect. So like, I just want to make sure you understand that that's going on for me.
That was so good. Yeah. He could have just said that. Obviously, with all of this, it's like, I wouldn't want, you know, I've sent some text messages, obviously not like that, but I've sent some messages that I would not want to see online.
Yeah.
And so it is easy for us, like as outsiders, to be like, he should have just done that, you know, and it's like as if it's so easy. I don't think
Right.
it's easy. And I don't think that like what he's going through is like anything to like to make light of. And
Yeah.
you know, obviously like he's hurting.
And yeah, and what we're talking about, what you made reference to earlier, of like an opportunity for intimacy and connection was missed. It's true. It's like friction in relationship. There's potential to like engender deepening and like closeness. And what he did in terms of like, these are my terms, obey them or I'm out. There's no opportunity for closeness there because he is not revealing himself
Right.
in any way. Yeah. And this is something that hits pretty close to me, and I know to you too, because we have a friend who was dating someone very similar kind of dynamic where the person our friend was dating was asking them to cut themselves off from previous partners and even friends, and under the guise of, this is really disruptive to me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm really sensitive
Don't
to
you
this.
care about me?
Yeah. Like, and our friend was constantly backpedaling and like trying to, and was worried about being abandoned because this set up a dynamic of, I could go, you know, like the things you've done even before we met are already a problem for me.
Yes.
They're already disrupting me. So like, you have work to make up for already, even though we're just starting.
You start in a hole.
Right.
Yeah. Even the first day that you meet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and then there's you're always trying to climb out of that hole, and you actually never can, because the person that's making it your problem, even if you meet all the conditions, say you're like, okay, I'm going to cut myself off from all these friends. I'm never going to talk to my male friends ever again. Right. Because that doesn't, when you do that, they realize that didn't make me feel better. Right.
Right.
So then a new condition comes in.
Yeah.
Now you have
prove
to do
it
this.
to me again.
Right. Prove it to me again. And then they do that. And it's like, it's never enough. By the way, it's never enough.
It's never.
Because the target is always moving. So, yeah, obviously be on the lookout for that. But I do just want to say, yeah, there are some takes online with regards to this of like, see how strategic men are, see how kind of like evil and conniving they are, which of course they are. But in this case, like, I just think a lot of guys are not doing it on purpose, and I don't think that makes it any better. But in some ways, I feel like it's almost worse, because they're sort of like, I didn't mean to, and like, I wasn't doing it on purpose. And so then I just feel like they just don't take responsibility. I don't think the people that are doing it on purpose take responsibility either, but I just feel like this is almost sneakier or something. So it's just harder, I think, to identify in people.
And it's like, the other thing we didn't mention about therapy is like, it's part of the therapist's job to validate and affirm their client. And I think, and this happened with our friend, someone can go to a therapist and the therapist would be like, yeah, you know, like, your pain is real. Like, you are a victim of these ways in some ways. And, you know, in these ways, you're a victim of these things in these ways. And someone can take that and be like, well, my therapist is on my side, so like I'm right.
Yeah.
And that happened with our friend where where I stand, the person they were seeing went to therapy for the first time when they were having this friction. And the person was like, well, my therapist agrees with me.
Yeah.
It's like, hello. That is so like a specific thing that you are making up, like the rules to.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. And that's our show. Thanks for joining us. Our music is by Nightlight. We self-produce this podcast, so please subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps.